Okay, it's 5:03. I think we're almost all here. Let's see. Oh, Everett. Hi, Everett. You found us.
Yeah, Domi's running late, so I had this open just to begin with. So we'll see what happens. I'm just going to write down the steps, and she'll catch up with you.
Beautiful. Is that? Do I see Domi in the car? Is that her in the car? I see. They might be in the car with Julie.
Oh, that may be true. That's really funny.
Oh. So Everett, I'm going to add you to my email list if that's okay.
That sounds great.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to, but I didn't want to. I don't want to clog your email box.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate that, though.
Thank you. All right, should we get started? So I asked everybody to get 2 cutting boards, and I just realized I only have 1. So I'm going to grab my second one. And the reason is because we're going to be cutting meat on this one cutting board. We're just going to use it one time. We're just going to be using it to trim our skirt steak. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to take your skirt steak and take it out of the package, okay? And go ahead and lay it out onto your cutting board. For many of you, it might be pretty long. It might be a long piece of skirt steak. So let's see what everyone's looks like. I'll show you here on mine. Okay, so I'm gonna unroll mine here. So yeah, I actually have more than what most of you have, but I'm cooking for more people, so I'm cooking for our leftovers. So my skirt steak looks like this, okay? You see it's this big, long strip of beef. What we're gonna do is I would like you to cut it into quarters, into 4 strips, so that it can fit both in your marinating pan and in your cast iron pan. So cut it into a length that will fit into your cast iron pan. So I'm gonna make mine, I'm gonna cut this one maybe into 3rds or 4ths, let's see. And you can see here, if you take a look, skirt steak is very interesting. It has these really kind of defined fibers. You see here, you can really see the grain of the meat. Okay, they're very thin. So we're not going to cut this steak. We're not going to cook this steak very long. We're not going to sear it that long. It's only going to sear for about 3 minutes per side, maybe 2 minutes, depending on how well you want your steak. But look at how thin it is. Okay, this is what my skirt steak looks like. So I'm just going to lay out my meat. I'm going to stack it into a little pile here. Okay, so I'm going to cut this second piece in half. All right. Okay, so I have all my meat stacked up. I'm going to wash my hands now because my hands have touched this raw meat. So I'm now going to go wash my hands. And this knife that I used to cut the meat, I used a utility knife, but you can either wash, while you're washing your hands, you can either wash this knife to reuse it. I have a second knife I'm gonna use, a chef's knife, we're gonna use for the rest of our cooking today. So, if you're gonna use a chef's knife, and if you've been using a chef's knife to cut your skirt steak, go ahead and put it into the sink. I forgot, Talia, are you cooking with seitan or tofu? Anyone not using skirt steak today? Talia?
I'm using steak, so.
You are using steak?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, okay. Anybody not using beef today? Anyone using any other kind of protein? All right, good. Okay, so go ahead and wash your hands. We always wash our hands after we touch raw meat. We're gonna wash our hands again in a little bit, but right now, I'm gonna ask you to season your meat. So I have here a pan, like roughly the size of my cast iron pan. So this is kind of shallow. It doesn't have to be that deep. You can use a plate if you want. So you're gonna grab your vegetable oil, or I'm using grapeseed oil. You can use canola oil, grapeseed oil, any kind of neutral oil. So grab your oil, grab your salt and pepper, preferably kosher salt, and grab your ground cumin. So have all of that close by. All right, so I'm gonna take my tongs. So as much as possible, I'm gonna try to keep my hands as clean as possible. I'm gonna lay out this meat here in like a single layer on my cutting board, like this. And I'm going to just kind of spread it out. I'm going to very, very carefully drizzle a very light layer of oil onto each piece of meat. And that's just so that the seasoning that we're going to season with will stick onto onto your meat. Okay, so I'm just going to drizzle a tiny bit of oil onto each bit of meat, just like that. It doesn't have to, you just want a very thin coating. You can just drizzle some on and then spread it around with your tongs too. Okay, just like that. I'm gonna take my tongs and using the back of my tongs, I'm just gonna kind of rub it in, just spread it around. And again, you just want a very thin layer so that the seasoning that we're gonna use will stick onto the steak. Okay. All right. So next, I'm gonna grab my salt and pepper. I'm gonna use my hand, my clean dry hand. I'm gonna use it to season the meat on one side here. So I'm just gonna season a very light layer. And do you remember when we've talked about seasoning anything, protein, vegetables, we season from on high. And when you season from on high, the salt crystals are able to kind of spread out a little bit more. They're not all clumped together in one spot. So just sprinkle from on high, just like this. Okay. And again, a very fine layer of salt over every part of the meat. And salt, again, will bring out the flavor and everything. Don't be afraid to use salt when you're cooking meat because it really draws out the flavor.
Wait, Lynna?
Okay. Yeah?
Did you put anything else besides salt on it?
We're gonna put salt and pepper and then cumin. So right now I'm on the salt step. All right. So here I have all my meat is salted on one side. I'm gonna put pepper on the other side. I'm just gonna put grinding some fresh pepper over the meat. And the last thing I'm gonna do is season it with some cumin. I have ground cumin here. And what we'll do is if you want, you can measure. You'll need a total of about 3 to 4 teaspoons, depending on how much meat you have. I'm just gonna use my fingers because my fingers are clean and they're dry. So I'm just gonna take a big pinchful of cumin and just sprinkle it from on high again over the meat. A very thin layer, a very fine layer of cumin, okay? So go ahead and do that for all your pieces of meat. You wanna drizzle it with some oil, make sure you coat each piece of meat well with some oil, season it with salt, pepper, and cumin. And then we're gonna turn every piece over with your tongs and do the same thing with the other side. All right. So go ahead, and if you have any questions, feel free to shout out. My executive producer, Emmett, is here today to take any questions. I'm just turning my meat over so I can do the exact same thing on the other side. Drizzle with a light layer of oil, salt, pepper, and cumin. The reason I chose this menu today is because we're now approaching the late summer, but the late summer is when some of the best fruits and vegetables are out. And I really wanted us to make a dish that took advantage of the amazing tomatoes and peppers and avocados that are out. So That's why we're making carne asada. We're having a Mexican themed dish. Okay, so I'm just taking the back of my tongs and spreading it around with oil, spreading the oil around in a very light layer. Just smearing it around. Okay. Again, because these pieces of meat are so thin, they're going to cook pretty quickly. Seasoning from on high with a very fine layer of kosher salt, making sure every part of the meat has a little bit of salt on it. As you can see, I don't measure a whole lot in when we cook together. I try to, I mean, certain dishes I will have measurements. Like when some of us made chicken tikka masala together, and with those measurements, I was pretty clear on the measurements, but when it comes to roasting and searing, usually our dishes are pretty forgiving. So you can just trying to teach you all to eyeball. Know roughly what a teaspoon looks like, what a tablespoon looks like, what a cup looks like. And some fresh pepper. If possible, I always recommend using kosher salt and freshly ground pepper. Kosher salt tends to have the right amount of saltiness when you cook. It's the preferred salt of most restaurant chefs and cooks because it's not too salty. It's very inexpensive. It's not, you don't have to use like fleur de sel or sel de gris for, like any kind of fancy Himalayan sea salt for general cooking. Certain dishes for sure, and for finishing. But when you're just doing everyday dishes, searing, roasting, generally kosher salt has just the right amount of salinity. Okay, so I have my meat coated on both sides with salt, pepper, and cumin. And I'm going to go ahead and just place this into my dish and just let it sit here. We're just gonna let it marinate for about, 10 or 15 minutes while we prep the rest of our ingredients. So I'm just taking my tongs. I've managed to not get my hands dirty. If you accidentally touched the meat, make sure you wash your hands again. Okay, so I'm just taking the meat off the cutting board, and I have it in my shallow pie dish here. I'm just gonna set it aside. Okay. And I'm going to now take my cutting board that had meat on it. We're gonna get rid of it. Put it in your sink. If you don't have another cutting board, if you just have this one, you can wash it now. But I'm just gonna go ahead and put this away, and I have my second cutting board ready to go. Great. So I'll wait till everyone's mostly, oh, Marco, your steaks look just like mine. Nice. Corbin, how many people are you cooking for today? Just the 4 of you? Cool. Okay. Anybody has any questions, let me know. The next step we're going to do is we're going to be prepping our ingredients for the rest of our dishes. We're going to be making sauteed peppers and onions. We're going to make a pico de gallo, and we're going to make guacamole. For the sake of efficiency, I'm going to have us prep certain ingredients all at once and have us set aside what we need for each dish. So for example, I'm going to have us press all of our limes first. I'm going to have us chop up all of our garlic at once. I'm going to have us slice and chop our onions all at once and then set them aside. And that way, we don't have to keep going back to prepping ingredients. You can just have all your ingredients all ready to go for when you need it. So the first thing we're going to do, everybody, once you have your cutting board, is get your limes and get ready to juice your limes. I'm using the citrus press. I know many of you have seen me use it before. If you don't have a citrus press, yes, I had a lot left over from last week, so I'm going to use about maybe 10 limes today. If you have a little bit left over, it's fine. You can drizzle some over your steak later, but we're going to use limes for pretty much everything we're going to be cooking with today. So we do need a lot of limes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and slice all my limes first in half. And then that way they'll be ready for me to zest all at once, or sorry, juice all at once. So I'm going to do about 10 and hope that's enough. We're going to be using this as a marinade. We're using lime juice and garlic as a marinade for our steak. What we just did now was kind of more of a dry rub. But this, after we're done searing our meat, we're going to be coating our steak, our cooked steak, with more lime juice and garlic. So that's why we need a lot of lime juice. And we're going to need lime juice for guacamole, of course, and a little bit for the pico de gallo. So go ahead and start zesting your limes. I think I should make a list at some point of my most used kitchen tools. I know I've talked about them a lot, but I tend to use the citrus press a lot. I use, just because it's small, it doesn't take up a lot of space. And you can use it to juice oranges or lemons or limes. They have even bigger ones that are really big that you can actually put a whole grapefruit in. This one, this may be big enough for a small orange. And again, I like it because it's not mechanical. It doesn't require me to plug it in, and it doesn't take up a lot of space in my drawer. And it makes it really fast to juice lots of citrus. The other thing that people like to use too is a citrus reamer, which we have too. I can show you what that looks like in a little bit. So, yeah, like I said, we're going to be using quite a bit of limes. I know I misled some of you and made you buy a lot more limes than you needed last week when we made Vietnamese rice noodle salads. So I was trying to think of a dish this week where we could use up extra limes and extra peppers, because I know Natalie's mom had peppers left over.
How much lime juice do you need? Like,
I'm doing about 10 limes. I'm juicing about 10, but you use whatever you have.
like how much is that? A cup or what?
We'll probably get close to a cup. We'll probably use close to a cup of lime juice. Like I said, I don't measure that well. I kind of taste and I taste as I go along. But roughly a cup of lime juice, because we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be using it to marinate our steak after it's done. I think the limes really add a brightness to everything you cook. Sometimes when something's tasting kind of a little dull or bland, I use some lemon or lime juice to perk up the flavors. So citrus like lemons, limes, oranges are kind of a secret weapon in the kitchen, because you can always use it to add flavor and brightness to a dish. All right, so almost done juicing. Maybe a little under a cup. If you have some left over, it's okay. You can make like a lime agua fresca, limeade. You can, again, sprinkle it over your tacos or whatever you decide to eat with your carne asada. So there's my lime juice. I'm gonna put my citrus press away. I tend to wash things as I go, just to make cleanup a little easier. And while you continue to press your limes, I'll show you what this is a citrus reamer. This is another tool. If you're just doing a couple limes, this is handy too. It's this wooden citrus reamer. Hey, Dami. Hey, Julie. Hi. So glad you're back. So yeah, this is my citrus reamer. Okay, so I have my lime juice ready. Okay, and the next thing I'm gonna do after this, we're just doing a lot of prep today, is we're gonna start chopping our garlic. So peel your garlic. I'm gonna do about, I think I asked for 4 cloves. You might, if you really like garlic, feel free to chop up more. I'm gonna do 6 because I'm gonna add some garlic to my pico de gallo and my guacamole. So I'm gonna be smashing my garlic, peeling them, and then chopping it finely. So the next step after you're done with your lime juice is prepping your garlic. So the steps I always take when I chop garlic is I smash each clove just so that makes it easier to peel. I smash it with the side of the blade of my knife. And then I have my garbage bowl nearby, so it makes it easy to just pick off the skins here. And then I've talked about this a lot before, but with garlic, there's always this like kind of hard brown end. So I like to cut that piece off too, just because it's hard to eat and doesn't look that good. I'm peeling all my garlic first, and then we'll finely chop it. And we'll set some garlic, we'll set all your garlic aside. You'll have all your garlic available. Remember to examine your garlic too. If you come across a piece of garlic that has like some scarring, like, I don't know, like a big brown piece that doesn't look so good, that looks like it might be mold or some kind of bruise, feel free to cut that piece off. You know, you guys, most of you have probably started school. Taryn starts school this week, right, Taryn? Right around your birthday. Yeah. Taryn's birthday is on Tuesday. And Taryn's gonna be 12. Okay, so make sure when you guys, once you start school, or as you've started school, I've been cooking to make sure there's lots of leftovers so I don't have to worry about making a brand new lunch every day. So maybe on Sundays when you can cook like a double batch of whatever we're cooking so that you can have leftovers for lunch. Okay, so I have all my garlic peeled, and I'm gonna go ahead and just cut off that brown stemmy part that we don't want to eat. Okay. All right, and that can go into the compost. All that part you don't need. And then I'm just gonna sort through my garlic and make sure there's no, like those brown parts I was telling you about. So I see one here, I'm just gonna cut that off and throw it away. And I think that's good. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start finely chopping my garlic. And what I do is I don't lift my knife off the cutting board really when I'm chopping. When I'm chopping garlic, I kind of just keep the tip of my blade. I see little bits of skin here. I just keep the tip of my blade on the cutting board, And then I just very easily roll my knife up and down what I want to cut, and making sure your fingers are out of the way. Something that's pretty handy that we have that I haven't asked you to use yet, because I know not a lot of people have it, is a garlic press. That's a really fast way to process a lot of garlic without having to do a lot of chopping. I don't want you to have to get tools you don't need, so I'm just assuming you don't have it. So that's why I'm having you chop garlic. And it's always a good idea to have this skill anyway. So I'm just finely chopping my garlic. And I'm just running my knife through it now. Every so often I scrape it all together back into a pile, and then I run my knife through that whole pile. Okay. So just finely chopped, just because we're going to be adding this to our guacamole, adding this to our marinade. You don't want to have chunks, huge chunks of garlic in your marinade and your guac, and even your pico de gallo. So that's why we're going to chop it as finely as possible. So I'm going to put all my chopped garlic into a little bowl, and that way we can have it handy to use throughout our cooking today. All right. So we're processing all of our garlic. And then the next thing we're going to do once you're done with your garlic is we're going to chop and slice onions. I know this is not your favorite part, Cameron. I know it always makes you cry. I'm very sorry. I don't have a good technique for how to not cry, but if anybody wants to research that and get back to us, feel free. We've heard of people putting a slice of bread in your mouth or wearing goggles. I find sometimes when I wear contact lenses, yeah, put on goggles.
Lynna,
That like,
you can put the onions in the fridge before you cut them.
ooh.
I have goggles when I
Oh.
was and it didn't work at all.
Maybe it depends on the freshness of the onion.
Cried, so
Yeah. Yeah, so, all right. So I'm gonna have my garlic mostly chopped, finely chopped. I'm gonna transfer them to a little ramekin, little bowl. Okay. And now we have all this garlic on hand for when you're ready to use them later for our dishes. Okay. Yes, goggles could probably help. I'm a little hesitant to suggest goggles because I know goggles will make your vision a little bit blurrier. And I think with handling sharp knives, it's a good idea to have your, to be able to see everything clearly. So we're gonna keep using the same cutting board. My goal is for us to use this cutting board for the rest of our dinner. So we don't have to, you're already using another cutting board. We used one already earlier. So the next thing I'm gonna do is have you grab your red onions. If you weren't able to find red onions, it's fine. You can just use regular onions, yellow or white. But I'm gonna have you all use red onions for now. We're gonna be chopping red onions for both the guacamole if you want. I mean, I love raw onions, so I tend to put it into guacamole. You don't have to. I'm gonna be chopping red onions for guacamole and for the pico de gallo, and then we're gonna be slicing red onions for sautéing. So why don't we do some chopping first? So I'm gonna take one. If you're going to use your raw red onion for guacamole and pico de gallo, go ahead and chop a whole onion. So what I do when I chop an onion is I cut off both ends like this, like the root end and the stem end, and then I peel my onion. I peel the skin off, make sure I get all the peel. And this way I have a flat surface to cut on too. I have two flat surfaces. So when I cut it, so when I rest it on the cutting board, it's just sitting there flat like this. And then I cut it in half, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them down on the flat side again, just to minimize those fumes coming up, making us cry. And then I'm going to chop this onion. I'm going to chop this onion by cutting very thin little slits into this half here. I'm making these little vertical slits. And I'm not cutting all the way through the onion. I'm kind of leaving at one end of it intact because I want it to kind of stay together. But I'm cutting these very thin, like probably like a 1/4 inch thick or even smaller, very thin slices so they kind of like look like a little fan like that. But I'm going to keep them all together. I'm going to do that with both halves. I'm already starting to cry a little bit. If you need to take a break from chopping, go ahead, get a drink of water, but don't touch your eyes. Okay, so we're going to chop our onion like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to cut very thinly across those little cuts that I made. And what happens is I'm getting these little fine little mini diced onions. I'm cutting them as thin as possible. And I'm crying. All right, very thin. So I get these fine little thin little pieces of minced or chopped, finely chopped onions here. And this end piece, I just kind of roughly chop it there like that. Okay, so I have this red onion that's chopped here. This might be enough for most of you for what you'll need for your pico de gallo and your guacamole. I think maybe this half might be enough for most of you. I'm going to make a big batch, so I'm going to cut my second half here. You can also serve this chopped red onion on the side as an additional topping for your tacos. Okay. So I'm going to take these onions that I've cut and I'm going to set them aside in a bowl. All right, just like this. This is a lot of red onion. If this is too much, you can use it again as a topping for your tacos later. We can also add it to your marinade too if you want. That's fine, we can do that. You can also just, any extra that you don't use, you can also add it to your sauteed onions later. It's okay if these are chopped. All right, so I have a bowl of chopped onions here. I'm gonna set aside far away from where I'm standing so they don't keep making me cry. And then I'm gonna take my second red onion and I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna peel it. This time I'm gonna slice them. I'm not going to chop them this time. I'm just gonna slice them. Okay, so I'll show you how I'm gonna slice them. This will go a lot faster. So this meal is a meal that's pretty great to have year round, but especially when tomatoes are in season. Okay, so I have my peeled onion here that's flat on one side, or flat on both sides, and I'm gonna set it on the flat end. I'm gonna slice it in half, and this time I'm going to cut thick slices out of them. Not too thick, but like, let's see, these are about maybe 1/2 inch. Okay, so I'm just gonna cut these into slices. Okay, because we're gonna saute these. Okay. I'm just cutting this one onion into slices here. Right, just like this. And you can go ahead and place your sliced onions into a big bowl, because what we're going to do next, in a little bit, is we're going to add your peppers to this. So we're just going to put all your sliced onions into a bowl and set them aside for now. We'll get to that later once we're ready to slice our peppers. Okay, any questions? I'm gonna rinse my hands really quick because my hands are oniony. All right, so let's get ready to, once you're ready, oh, I know, I see you guys, some of you wiping tears away. Yeah. All right, once you're done chopping your onion or slicing your onion, remember your second onion should be sliced and sliced pretty thick, like maybe like a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick. And that's for sauteing later. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on an oven to the lowest setting possible. So I'm going to turn this oven I have here to about 200. Yep, that's my lowest setting is 200 degrees. I'm going to turn my cast iron pan or saute pan up to about medium.
Auntie Lena?
Yeah.
So put the pan in the oven and then heat it for 200 degrees?
You don't have to put anything in the oven yet. Just turn your oven up to 200. We're going to use the oven to keep things warm.
Do we need 1 or 2 racks?
Just 1 rack.
Okay.
And then we're going to turn your cast iron or your saute pan to about medium. Medium to medium high. We're going to get ready to start searing off our meat. So as your pan heats, we can wait for everybody to catch up. So if you're finishing up chopping or slicing onions, go ahead and do that and then maybe somebody can go turn your oven up to 200 and turn your cast iron or your saute pan to about medium medium to medium high, depending on the burner.
Lynna?
Yeah.
Our oven goes lowest to 100, so should we still do 200 or should
Yeah, go do it to 200.
Okay.
Thanks for asking. All right. So go ahead, everybody. Make sure your stove is on to about medium to medium high. Redmond, I see you blinking. I know those onions are very fumy. Feel free to put your onions far away from where you're standing so that they don't keep making you cry, or stand away from the onions.
Am I supposed to put any of the lime juice on the meat or no?
Not yet, Marco. I'll tell you when. Thanks for asking. So why don't we go ahead and do that while your pan is heating? Okay, while your pan is heating, you want your pan to get really hot before you put the meat in. Go ahead and take about maybe like 3 or 4 tablespoons, like 2 tablespoons of garlic, roughly, the equivalent of about 3 cloves of garlic, and throw it onto your onto a shallow dish, like this. So I have about
Auntie Lena? Auntie Lena?
Yes.
What if we don't have a shallow dish?
Get a bowl.
Okay. Thank you.
You want it to be big enough, Sophia, for your meat to be able to sit in it and go into the oven. And so it needs to be an oven safe dish.
Auntie Lena?
Yeah?
Is this okay?
That's okay. Yeah. That can go into it's like a cake pan, right?
Yeah. I have 2 of them.
So go ahead and, perfect. So go ahead and put your garlic in, and then everybody pour in about, pour in about 1/4 cup of lime juice.
Auntie Lena, if I'm using 2 though, how much should I put in each?
Put about 1 tablespoon of garlic in each, and about maybe like 1/8 of a cup of lime juice into each. You don't want, you want
you.
enough lime juice to just make sure all the garlic is covered. So this is how much I have in my pan here. So I have all this garlic and a layer of lime juice that we're going to be using this to coat our meat after it comes off the stove. And what will happen is that the hot meat, after it's cooked, will absorb the marinade, the lime juice and the garlic flavors, okay? So my pan is hot. Okay, my pan is like super, super hot, which is what I want. I'm gonna put in some oil, be very careful. Make sure you have your tongs ready. I'm gonna put in my oil into my pan. Okay, maybe about a couple tablespoons, enough to coat the pan, because remember your meat already has a little bit of oil on it. And then I'm gonna put in enough meat to just cover one layer of the pan. I don't want the meat to overlap. Okay, so and when you put it down, it's gonna splatter. So be very careful to put it down gently, like lay it down like that. Lay your meat down. Make sure you don't plop it in because then the oil will splatter everywhere. So I have I'm gonna fit in 3 in mine, okay? Now I'm gonna set a timer for 3 minutes. Hey Google, set a timer for 3 minutes.
3 minutes, starting now.
All right. So I'm gonna set a timer now for 3 minutes. And
You?
yeah, I can hear myself through my AirPods now. Anyway, okay. So your meat should be in the pan. We're gonna sear them off for 3 minutes on one side. Okay. So
How long, Lena, for one side? 3 minutes?
You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
okay, how's that?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. The oven should be at about 200. Okay, and you're gonna cook each side of your meat for about 3 minutes.
Okay, thank
And
you.
while you're, and make sure that your pan is hot before you put the meat in, and
Okay.
be very gentle when you put it in.
Thanks.
So while your meat is cooking, we're gonna prep our peppers. We're gonna multitask here. So I'm going to I have a couple different kinds of peppers. I'll show you what I'm gonna do with. So some of you might have bell peppers like this. Temperature, the oven should be at 200. We're just using it to keep everything warm. Okay, so I have this pepper here, this bell pepper. I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna process this bell pepper first. I'm gonna cut it in half, like this, break it open, and then you see there's a stem and like all these seeds inside. Just take your fingers and use your hands, use your fingers to scoop it out and just put it into your compost. Okay? And then what you're gonna be left with is, you're gonna see here some of these like membrane here. I'm just gonna use my fingers to just kind of tear them off. And there's a little bit of seeds are in there. I'm just gonna shake them off. Same thing with my other side, the other half of my pepper. So you can do that with all your peppers. It's
There's
okay
a
if some of the,
pepper in my red one.
oh good, yeah, you can use a mini one too. Do the same thing, Brenda, it's so cute. Okay, and then for those of us who got Jimmy Nardello's, I think maybe Leilani, you might have Jimmy Nardello's. Anybody else? Corbin has them, awesome. Clayton, cool. Oh, my timer's about to go off, everybody. So I'm gonna take a pause from the peppers and I'm gonna flip my meat. So those of you whose timers are about to go off, hey Google, stop. Go ahead and flip the meat. And again, be very gentle when you do it. Make sure you're not splattering the oil. Just very carefully lay it over on the other side. It should be browned on one side. And now I'm gonna set a timer for 2 minutes. Hey Google, set a timer for 2 minutes. just because
Sure. 2 minutes. Starting
just
now.
because these pieces of meat are pretty thin, I don't want them to overcook. So I'm gonna set it for 2 minutes and then check them, and then let's decide whether I want to keep them on longer. If you like your meat at a medium for this dish, then 2 minutes on the second side should be just about right, maybe 2.5 minutes. Okay, so for those of you who have Jimmy Nardello peppers, this is what it looks like. Where am I? Here. Okay, here, see? These are sweet. They look like they might be spicy, but they're super sweet, and they're really in season right now. So it's a really good time to find them if you can at the store, if you can get them. And what I'm gonna do with this, for those of you who have a Jimmy Nardello peppers, if you have bell peppers, just keep processing your bell peppers. Oh, I didn't show you what I wanted you to do with the bell peppers. Just slice them. Slice them about the same width as your onions. So about maybe a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. I'm just cutting them into like these half rings, just like that, okay? For Jimmy Nardello's, cut the stems off. You don't want the stems. And then I'm gonna make a split down the middle, like this. And then you're gonna see some seeds inside and some ribs. Just take those out. These are edible. And if you leave some ribs and seeds behind, it's totally fine. Some people just roast them whole or eat them whole, but I prefer for this dish, I don't necessarily want to have the seeds, so I'm going to take the seeds out. So do that with your long Jimmy Nardello peppers. Just make a split down the middle, open it up, and then scoop out the ribs and the seeds. Okay. You don't have to get every single seed out. It's totally fine to still have some seeds left in there. Okay, my timer's about to go off. Okay, so there we go. My timer went off. I'm gonna check the steak like this. If it's browned enough, great. Looks like it's brown. So I'm gonna grab my marinade, the garlic and the lime juice. Remember the garlic and the lime juice we had? I'm gonna bring it over to the stove, and I'm going to take the meat off and use my tongs. I'm gonna coat both sides of the meat with the marinade. So I'll show you what I'm gonna do here. I'll show it over here. So my meat is browned on both sides. I'm going to coat, and can you do the stove, please? I'm gonna take the meat off. I'm gonna coat both sides, just turn it over one time. Put it in,
Hey,
turn the
Lynna.
meat over.
Our meat is a bit thicker. How do we tell when it's done?
Go ahead and leave it on for another minute then.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, It's gonna continue cooking for a little bit. So now I'm gonna,
Good.
what was the question?
Our steak smells so good.
Oh, I know, doesn't it? My house smells so good. So now with your hot pan that's still hot, go ahead and add if you still have meat to saute, go ahead, or pan fry, go ahead and add them to the pan. Some of you may already have been able to fit it all into one batch. Hey Google, set a timer for 3 minutes. And then with this meat that you've coated with the lime juice and the garlic, go ahead and put them in the oven. That's already at 200. And let it just stay in there to stay warm. And then go back to your peppers. So the peppers, if you use Jimmy Nardello peppers, you don't have to cut them anymore. You can just leave them like split in half like this, or even you can split them in half. And then add this to your bowl of onions. Remember that bowl of onions that you sliced? You can go ahead and add the peppers to this bowl of onions. Okay, so do that for all your peppers, however many you have. I have another bell pepper here. I'm just gonna slice this into roughly like half-inch slices. And then I have my Jimmy Nardello. I'll cut the stem off, split it down, and then take the ribs and the seeds off. Right. Cool. I think I might do one more pepper. These peppers are all sweet, so don't worry about spiciness. These won't be spicy. Bell peppers are not spicy. I am not personally a fan of green bell peppers, so I'm just using red bell peppers today. And I have my bowl of red peppers and Jimmy Nardello peppers and red onions ready to saute. We're gonna saute it in the same pan that you seared your steak off in.
Auntie
Yes?
Lena, should
Yeah.
we put like the Ardell peppers? Should we put them also in the same bowl or no?
Yeah, yeah.
And we
Put
should
them all.
and we should try like should we like dice them though, or just leave them?
Are those Jimmy Nardellos?
I think so.
No.
No, actually no.
Oh, those are for your pico de gallo.
Okay.
Yeah, so you don't want to saute those. We're gonna use that for the pico de gallo.
But should I chop all of my peppers? Like all
It
three of
depends
them?
on how much you want.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yours are pretty big. You may not need all of them. If they're all as big as the one in your hand, you might only need one or two. All right. So set aside your bowl of onions and peppers. We're gonna sear them off in the same pan that we seared off our meat in. And that should be good. My second batch of beef. I don't know if all of you have two batches, but I have a second batch. It's about, the timer's about to go off. All right, hey Google, stop. And it should be nicely browned on one side. Yep. And we'll flip it over and set a timer for another couple minutes. Hey Google, set a timer for 2.5 minutes. Okay. All right, so now we're done with our steak. Steak's almost done. We are done chopping our peppers. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to prep our guacamole. So grab a big bowl that you're going to mix your guacamole in. I'm going to use this one. It was a gift from Cameron's mom. All right, and put it next to your cutting board. Grab your avocados. Okay. All right. So I'll show you how I'm going to process this avocado. What I have here is one avocado. I'm right-handed. I'm going to take my avocado in my left hand and use my right hand to cut into the avocado and just kind of rotate it around. Be very careful that you don't accidentally cut yourself. Twist it open, okay? And I'm gonna do that for about, depending on how much guacamole you wanna make. I'm gonna use about, I'll use about 4 avocados today, 4 or 5. So I'm gonna do the same thing with 4 avocados. When I'm cooking and prepping, I try to do all my steps at once so that it just makes it a little easier than having to pick up the knife over and over again. And I'm just processing all my avocados at once. Making sure they're ripe. You don't want them to be super soft, but you don't want them to be super hard either. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is, there's many methods of processing avocado, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and very carefully I'm going to put my knife, I'm going to kind of hit it into the, use the base of my blade and hit it into the seed, the avocado seed, and then twist it out. If you don't want to do it that way, you can also take a spoon. You can take a spoon and you can also dig it out with a spoon too. It's up to you. So I'm just gonna take out all the seeds from each of the avocados. Hey Google, stop. There goes my timer. I'm gonna turn off the heat of my stove. Remember, if your meat is done, you can turn the heat off your stove. Okay. And I'm gonna add the second batch of cooked meat to the pan that's in the
Auntie
oven that's
Lynna?
warming.
How long should it be in the oven?
We're gonna leave it in the oven until we're ready to serve it. Okay? So once again, I'm taking the meat off of the stove.
Thank you.
I'm coating it in the marinade. Okay? So making sure the entire piece of meat gets to touch the lime juice and garlic, and flipping it over and doing the same with the other side. And then turn your stove off for now. We're gonna go back to it in a little bit, but we don't need it right this minute because we're gonna prep some other ingredients first. Okay. All right, so go ahead and coat your meat on both sides in the lime and the garlic marinade, and then put it back in your oven to stay warm. It's gonna continue to cook for a little longer in there, but not that much because it's at a low temperature. Okay, so go ahead. If you're working on your guacamole, keep going.
Lynna, how long do we put it in the oven?
We're just gonna leave it in the oven until we're ready to serve.
Okay.
Yeah. So once we're done with everything else, we'll take it all in the oven. This way your meat will still be warm. And then in a little bit too, we'll be adding some tortillas to the oven just to get those warm too.
Auntie
So
Lynna,
Uh-huh.
are we gonna cook the peppers and the onions?
Yes, we're gonna cook the peppers and the onions in the same pan that you cooked your steak in. But we'll do that in just a second. I just wanna finish off with the avocado first. Hey, William. So I'm gonna show you now what I'm gonna do with my guacamole. If you like your guacamole chunky, then go ahead and score your guacamole, score each avocado half into big cubes. So I'm just gonna take my knife and run it up and down like 3 or 4 times. And then I'm gonna run it the other way crosswise another 5 or 6 times. So I have like this little grid of avocado. And I'm gonna take my spoon and over my bowl, let me show you. Over my bowl, I'm going to scoop out the avocado. If you like your guacamole smoother, feel free to make smaller cubes. Okay, so I'm just gonna, just like this, scoop it out. And then you can throw each half into the compost bowl. So I'm gonna score all my avocado first. So I'm not having to keep picking up my avocado and my spoon, and I'm just gonna score it all at once and then spoon it all at once. Okay. If you like yours smooth, make your avocado squares thinner or smaller, tinier. And then when you stir it too, it'll become creamy. So the trick with guacamole is making sure it's seasoned well, making sure you have the right balance of saltiness and tartness. And what's really nice about the tartness is if you add lime juice, it'll keep it from browning as quickly. I tend to try to make only enough guacamole that I'm going to eat in one sitting, that we're going to serve in one sitting, because leftover guacamole, it's edible, but it doesn't look as good because it turns brown. And there's ways to prevent it. You can put a piece of plastic over it. I've read you can also like pour a very thin layer of water over a flat surface of guacamole, and that keeps the oxygen out. It's the oxygen that causes the avocado to oxidize and turn brown. But today I'm just going to try to make enough for what we're going to have tonight. So I'm taking my spoon and I'm just going to scoop out all my avocado halves into my mixing bowl. Okay. This dish, this meal is, I was talking to Taryn's family yesterday, this kind of a staple meal in our family and her family too. A lot of times it's really handy to have, if you have some tortillas and guacamole, and some kind of protein, you can quickly just whip up some tacos. You can also, you don't have to sear off steak. You can also use like leftover roast chicken. You can just do it with rice and beans. Sometimes you can put an egg on top. So I'm just scooping out all my avocado halves. And then we're gonna season these in a little bit. And I don't know, most of you probably know this, but avocado is so good for you. It has really good fats in it. It's often what's called like the perfect food. A lot of parents like to give their babies avocado because it's really easy to eat and digest. And it's so good for you. My kids did not, well, Dee liked avocado when he was a baby, but Clara and Emmett were not fans. I have a lot of pictures of them spitting it out. But it is so, they eat guacamole now, and they eat avocado if it's seasoned well. So I'm just going to, I have my big bowl of avocado chunks. And like I said, I like mine chunky, but if you like yours smoother, you can just you can stir yours more. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some salt and some lime juice. Okay, so let's add some lime juice first. You have your reserved lime juice. I'm just gonna pour in enough, you know, everybody has a different amount of avocado, but I'm pouring in enough to, I don't know, let's start with a couple tablespoons. And you can always add more later. Maybe start with 1.5, or just enough avocado, enough lime juice to make sure every piece gets coated with some lime juice. Okay. And then next, we could always add more. I'm going to add some salt. I'm going to put in a healthy pinch of salt for the amount of avocado I have. Everyone's amount is going to differ, but feel free to start with a good healthy pinch and then add more as you taste it. Okay. And then, like I said earlier, I like to have red onion in my avocado, in my guacamole. So I'm going to take some of that chopped red onion and add it to my guacamole. And just, you know, use however much you think your family would like to have. Again, stir it all together. Okay. Some people like to add tomato to their guacamole. I'm not going to, but this is my guacamole so far. Some people also like to add cumin. If you like cumin, if you like the taste of cumin, you can add that to your guacamole as well. All right, so we have our guacamole done, and
Lynna?
it's time to taste. Yes, Brenna?
If you have a banana masher, can you use it?
Yeah, you can. If you want a really smooth avocado, a guacamole, Brenna, you can definitely use a banana masher or a mashed potato masher. Okay, so mix up your guacamole. Make sure you taste it. Make sure you taste it for saltiness and tartness. And if you want to add red onion, you can. Oh, and I forgot one ingredient. I'm going to add garlic to mine. We have all that chopped garlic. Go ahead and add chopped garlic to yours if you like chopped garlic. So I'm going to add some here. I don't want to taste it for me. Oh, you can taste it. Emma's going to be my taster. All right. So I like mine chunky, but if you like yours smooth like Brenna, go ahead and just mash it around, and you can use a fork even, or a potato masher or banana masher. Oh, okay, go ahead. I just added salt right there, so okay, go ahead. I'm gonna add some pepper to it too. Good? Is it salty enough? Is it tart enough? Okay. Want more red onion or garlic? Okay, you're about to more red onion? Okay, Emmett wants more red onion. All right. I'm so sorry. You're hearing me crunch. I'm gonna take my earpods out. All right. Emmett wants a little more red onion, so Here we go. Cool. Okay. Make sure, again, make sure it's tart enough. I think for me, guacamole has to be pretty tart. All right, and that'll keep it from browning too. Guacamole's done. We'll set this aside. And now let's turn on your stoves again, everybody. We're gonna saute our peppers while we do the last thing, which is our tomatoes for our pico de gallo. Okay, so turn on your oven or turn on your stove again to a medium to medium high. Turn on your pan, your burner, I mean.
Lynna, were we supposed to
All right.
put tortillas into the oven?
We're gonna do that right after this.
Okay.
All right, so make sure your oven's heating. I'm sorry, not your oven, your stove, your pan is heating. And you want it to be at about a medium to a medium high. Grab your bowl of peppers and onions and then pour it into the hot pan. There should be plenty of oil left in it. Okay, so you can saute your peppers and onions in the pan, in the leftover oil that's in it. Okay, so Emmett, I'm gonna put it in. Okay, and it should, you'll hear sizzling. All right, give it a stir. Make sure it's distributed in an even layer on the pan, in the pan, and then add a good healthy pinch of salt all over it. So just sprinkle salt all over those peppers and onions. Cool. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna let this saute around. I'm just gonna make sure it all gets coated in some of the oil, some of the fat. Okay, cool. And then we're gonna let that sit. And we're gonna move on to our pico de gallo. Last thing, okay? It's the very last thing we're gonna make. Okay, grab your tomatoes. So I have a mix of early grilled tomatoes and some Roma tomatoes. You just wanna make sure they're ripe. Okay, and I'm gonna show you, I'm just gonna chop these. So I'm gonna take a Roma, well, I'll take an early grilled tomato first. So I'm gonna cut it in half. I'm gonna take the stem, I'm gonna cut a little triangle and take out the stem part. You see here, I just cut a little triangle in. I'll show you how I do that again. I'm cutting it in half along one side of the stem. It depends on how many people you're serving. I'm gonna use about maybe, well, it depends on the size of your tomatoes too. Lynna, let me see your tomatoes.
Roughly this size. They're from our garden.
Okay. Oh, beautiful. Oh my gosh. I would use, if you can, I would try to use like 6 to 8 of those. Okay.
Thanks.
So I have my tomatoes here. I'm gonna cut them all in half. And then I'm gonna slice them down. I'm gonna slice them, I'm gonna stand them up and slice them. You need a really sharp knife to do this if possible. If you have a serrated knife, you can do that too. I'm gonna slice these into these circles. Okay. And then I'm gonna stack a couple of them on top of each other and just chop these into cubes. So I'm stacking them and I'm gonna turn them and cut them again into cubes. They can be roughly cut, but pretty small. Because you want these to be able to kind of fit onto a taco. Okay, so I have these tiny cubes, well, not too tiny, but I have these small cubes here. Okay, so I'm cutting each tomato into strips and then cutting them again into cubes, just like that. So they're roughly this size. Don't forget to give your onions and peppers a stir every so often so they don't burn. It's okay if they get a little charred. That's actually quite tasty. So I'm gonna give my onions a stir right now. Oh yeah, this is gonna come together pretty quickly. And don't forget to salt your onions and peppers. You're already starting to char a little bit, which is great. Okay. All right. Now, I'm gonna give you the stir. Now, grab another sheet tray if you have it and put your tortillas on it, or a plate. You can even use an oven-safe dinner plate. So I'm using these corn and flour tortillas, and I'm gonna open it up and just put the whole stack onto a plate and throw it into your oven. Make sure your plate is oven safe, or you can use a sheet tray too. I'm gonna put all my tortillas onto this plate and then throw them in the oven at 200. Your oven should still be at 200. Okay. And give your peppers another stir. And don't forget to make sure you salted them well. There was a little bit of residual salt probably left in the pan for when you sauteed the steak. But my peppers and onions are looking tender. They're looking soft, but they still have a little bit of crunch. I'm gonna turn off my heat now. I'm turning off my stove because the pan is still hot. It's still gonna cook the peppers a little bit, okay? And we're just gonna let it sit in the pan while we finish prepping our pico de gallo. So these chopped onions, chopped tomatoes, I'm just putting into my bowl. Small cubes. Okay. Small cubes. And transfer them into your bowl that you're going to mix your pico de gallo in. All right. Almost there, everybody. Home stretch. Forgot how many tomatoes I've cut, but pico de gallo is okay to have the next day. So if you have extra, totally fine. Okay. Again, cutting my tomato, cutting out the stem, and slicing them and then cutting them into cubes. Make sure your peppers and onions are, if they're done and looking pretty tender, turn off the heat, but leave them in your pan. Because what we'll do is we'll put together a platter to serve everything all at once. Okay, there you go. So I have my tomatoes mostly chopped. I'll just do one more tomato.
Auntie Lynna,
Yeah?
about how many tomatoes should we cut?
How big are your tomatoes, Sophia?
They're like,
I would do like 6.
6? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 6 of those. Okay, so I have my tomatoes chopped. And what I'm gonna do next is chop another tomato because these are kind of small. We're going to season the tomatoes and add any red onion to it. If you have cilantro and you want to add cilantro a little bit, go ahead and chop the cilantro. I don't have cilantro because I am not a fan of cilantro. If you want to add red onion and garlic, go ahead and add it to your tomatoes. I'm going to do that now. So I add my garlic and a healthy amount of red onion. There you go. I'm gonna add this to my tomatoes, my chopped red onion and garlic, salt, okay, healthy amount of salt, and lime juice. Okay, so some lime juice here, and some pepper. And again, if you're using jalapeno or serrano chili, mince that up really finely, and you can add it to your pico de gallo. And the green will be really pretty. I'll add a little bit of jalapeno. I have some sliced jalapeno left over from some pho we had this week, so I'll just chop that up. Good. So make sure you taste your pico de gallo. Taste it for saltiness and tartness and spiciness. If it's too spicy, you can add another tomato to it. Good. The tomatoes are at the peak, so they're really ripe. So now is a really good time to buy tomatoes. They're less expensive than normal. They're in season. They're ripe and tasty and sweet. Any chance you get to cook with tomatoes, please do it. So pico de gallo is done. Guacamole is done. Tortillas are heating in the oven. Peppers and onions are done. And just staying warm in your pan. Give it a stir. And now it's time to plate. I'm going to show you how you're going to slice your skirt steak. Let's see. All right, so I have a big platter here, which I'm going to set aside. Now I'm going to grab our meat. You can leave your tortillas in the oven. Okay. I'll show you how I'm going to slice the meat. If your cutting board is a little wet, grab a paper towel and just wipe it, give it a wipe. Because my cutting board right now has some tomato juice on it. So I'm just gonna grab a paper towel and give it a wipe. Okay, just like that. Again, we're still using the same cutting board to minimize dishes. And let's see, okay, so I'll show you now. I have our steak. I'm gonna put it right next to my cutting board. And I'll show you how to slice it. So,
Lynna, what do we add to the tomatoes? What do we add to the tomatoes? What do we add to the tomatoes?
Salt, pepper, lime juice, garlic, and red onion.
Okay, thank you.
And if you have any cilantro or jalapeno, you can add that too. Okay? All right. So we have our steak. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I'm going to slice it. I'm going to take I have my tongs in my left hand. I'm right-handed. My knife in my right hand. I'm just going to cut it along this, kind of cut it along the bias here. I'm just going to cut it on a slant. You see here? I'm not like cutting it up and down. I'm actually cutting it kind of sideways into the meat. Just like this. Okay. Feel free to taste it. This meat for me is done how I like it. It's like slightly pink in the center. It's not overcooked. Okay, feel free, as the chef, you have the liberty to take a taste. All right. And go ahead and just keep slicing your meat. We're gonna slice it along the bias. So we're slicing it kind of diagonally. You can see my knife is almost parallel to the board. I'm just cutting it sideways in it. Okay, if their pieces of meat are really long, you can cut them in half. Questions?
Do we have to worry about the grain, or I don't cook a lot of meat, so I'm just
cutting it along the bias this way.
Yeah.
So I'm cutting it actually, instead of cutting it across the grain, I'm cutting it along the bias.
Okay.
And yeah. And then this way, I'm gonna cut it in half too. Like some of these slices are pretty long. I'm gonna cut them in half. You can also cut them even smaller if you want. But yeah, some of these are smaller. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just put them onto a serving platter. Okay.
Auntie Lynna? Oh, well.
Yeah, Clayton?
The meat is like really good.
Oh, good. Thank you for telling me that, Clayton. I hope you like it. It's so simple, right? It's just salt and cumin and lime juice and garlic. So let's plate it up together. So I have my platter. I'm going to put some of the skirt steak on one part of it. You can plate this however you'd like. You can kind of spread it around. You can put it in one section. And next, I'm going to take my peppers and add it to this platter. My peppers and onions, like this. Okay. And finally, put this here. We're going to add our tortillas. So I'm going to grab my tortillas from the oven and then put them onto the same platter. And don't forget to turn your oven off. Don't forget to turn your ovens off. If your tortillas are not quite as warm as you'd like them to be, you can put them into the microwave for a little bit. And the microwave for maybe like 15 seconds. And that will kind of heat them up and make them softer again too. And don't forget your other condiments. So if you're gonna use cheese or sour cream or radishes or cilantro, feel free to add that to your table. All right. Let me show you what my pan looks like.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy your dinner. Hey, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Lynna.
Bye, Ella.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.